Ever since I was little, I've been fascinated with the fashion industry. I always knew that I was going to have a career in fashion. As I grew up, I went through the arguable cliche stages of wanting to be a fashion designer, a photographer, and I even aspired to one day be a creative director for a fashion house. And then a few years ago, whilst I was at uni, an accumulation of life choices and experience came together in a moment of realisation. And I realised that this glamorous, luxurious, creative and indulgent industry to which I both loved consuming and loved creating is not only built on destruction, oppression and exploitation, but is also racing at increasing speed towards a catastrophic roadblock. Let me explain who I am and why I'm here. I'm Annabelle Lindsay, a 21-year-old master's student from Leicester. During my final year at Sheffield Hallam, when I was doing my bachelor's in fashion management, I uncovered something called the circular economy, which if you've not heard of before, I will get into explaining all in good time. I'd never felt so connected to a topic in fashion before, but because I've only discovered it in my final year, I felt unfulfilled. So after 3 of the most stressful years of my life, with endless library sessions and sleepless nights, what did I do? I went straight back to university. So I started my Masters at Manchester Metropolitan this September in fashion and business, which had I have known there would have been a global pandemic, I may have waited a year. However, in my time that I was in Manchester, because I'm back home in Leicester now, I've been able to network with some incredible people in the conscious, ethical and sustainable fashion scene. My combined love of fashion, the circular economy and network and collaboration leads me to this moment right here as I'm talking to you. As part of an initiative to help advance towards a circular fashion economy, I'm launching the Circular and You project. A project designed to help engage us, the public, as consumers with the seemingly complex systems within fashion through channels like art, film, media, creativity and storytelling, to show how we can participate in making circularity the reality and how we can experience fashion in new innovative ways that exist outside of just consuming clothes. So my passion for a circular economy is arguably an accumulation of lifestyle choices that came together over the years. So I've created a quick timeline because I think it's important to give context as to why I feel so strongly about this movement. So this is how my conscious journey has unfolded up to now. In 2015, I became a vegetarian after binge watching all the vegan documentaries on Netflix. As I was younger, I didn't quite know how to communicate this initial conscious awakening. It was the first time I'd ever really experienced an inner awakening like that. But I'm now pursuing a commitment over time to transition into full-time veganism. In 2016, I moved to Sheffield Hallam University, where I began to shop in vintage stores and really began to experiment with my personal style. Sheffield has an excellent vintage scene, but I did still buy fast fashion from time to time. Things like Topshop and Primark were very accessible, not just literally on foot, but price-wise as well. In 2018, I started volunteering at Age UK in Sheffield, which is where I uncovered my love of charity shopping. I was always coming away from my shifts with really cool items, even like house ornaments and stuff. But I would say that my love of charity shopping at that point stemmed more from being able to get more for my money than it was the sustainable aspect of it. 2019 was my final year at uni and the year that I came across the circular economy, at which point I fully threw myself into a sustainable transition and had a realisation that my life's mission was to advocate for circularity as far as possible in all I do. So I set myself the challenge to only buy second-hand clothes for the rest of the year, and this was right at the start of 2019, so that was quite a big commitment or task to make for myself. But I also at the same time invested in long-lasting products, so things like a reusable safety razor and reusable cotton pads once I'd used up what I had left of the other stuff. Which brings us to 2020. So because charity shops were so much cheaper, I found that by the end of 2019 I had bought more clothes than I'd ever done in any year of my life. So it kind of felt very counterproductive to be buying secondhand when I was buying more, because it didn't address the issue of overconsumption. So this year I'm on a full-blown mission to fulfil the No New Clothes 2020 challenge, which means 366 days, leap year, no clothes shopping whatsoever, not secondhand, vintage, thrifted, nada, nothing. I would have to admit that the lockdown has helped to sway any impulses or desires to shop. However, I do feel like those desires have sort of melted away at this point, and I feel my urge to shop is pretty much non-existent, especially at the moment. Even in just the past couple of weeks, I've had another inner awakening, another realisation to the issues of racism within society today and within the fashion industry itself. I recognise the need to use my white privilege to help support the dismantling of institutions, internalised beliefs and behaviours and systems that maintain racism. But before I go any further, let's just go back to fashion and take a snapshot look at some of the facts of the industry today. The equivalent of one truck of clothing is landfilled or burnt every second. Fast fashion items are worn on average only 7 times, and the fashion industry is also the second largest consumer of water worldwide. Globally, we now consume about 80 billion new pieces of clothing every year, which is 400% more than just a couple of decades ago. Ironically, it seems that we are buying more and more, but loving and using our clothes less and less. The average UK shopper only wears 70% of what's in their wardrobe and throws out 70 kilograms of textile waste annually. Now, it doesn't take a genius to work out that on a planet with finite resources, this cannot be sustained, not from an environmental perspective or from a social perspective, by the people exploited right at the bottom of the supply chains who churn out this rapacious amounts of clothing every year to supply Western demand for fast fashion. Such statistics are being circulated on social media. These numbers and these facts are in the conversations within fashion, and we know more about the fashion industry and its damage than we've ever done. And I worry that we're becoming desensitised. We're becoming desensitised to these statistics and these facts and these numbers, and they're losing their shock value and therefore don't incur the same motivation to act and change our behaviours or to address the issues. But aptly quoted by Neil Strauss, shaming someone into action creates acting. Inspiring someone into action creates change. And this is why I want to approach change through the perspective of inspiration of what fashion could be. And this is where an idea of such simple yet radical brilliance comes into play. And I'll let Dame Ellen MacArthur, a leading pioneer in this movement, introduce the concept herself.
And if we know that we have finite materials, why would we build an economy that would effectively use things up, that would create waste? Life itself has existed for billions of years and is continually adapted to use materials effectively. It's a complex system, but within it there is no waste. Everything is metabolized. It's not a linear economy at all, but circular. If we could build an economy that would use things rather than use them up, we could build a future that really could work in the long term.
To summarise, the circular economy looks a little something like this, and it just makes sense. Yes, there are some efforts at recycling, but recycling in the fashion industry is not really scaled up on a mass level at this point, and as well, products aren't designed for ease of recyclability at the end of their product life cycle. So really what recycling does is it just buys us time against the inevitable of a linear system. It doesn't address the fashion industry's issues at their core. Now, circularity has been gaining traction in recent years, arguably becoming a bit of a buzzword amongst sustainable fashion players. But I believe this movement has hit a wall. Whilst catching on amongst brands and businesses, the concept of how to engage us, the public, and engage our participation has not taken off. There's a disconnect between the information that's put out there, and being able to understand how we as individuals can implement action and actually make a difference, also known as an action value gap. My motivations for supporting circularity were initially triggered by anger and disbelief at what really goes on behind the spectacle facade of fashion, but it's now maintained by my appreciation of planet, the environment, nature, of people, and valuing human life, and even the social importance of fashion within culture itself. I think it's a much more positive way to spark a conversation around activism when you discuss the inspiration and possibilities of what could be. So I know many people critique that utopia can't exist, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try, right? That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be ensuring that future generations will also have an opportunity to thrive on this planet. If COVID-19 has highlighted anything for me, it's that fashion is a system of indulgent excess which just simply cannot return to normal, because normal doesn't work. Yet whilst fashion may not be essential, it is important. Abrupt freezes to the fashion system, as we've recently experienced, jeopardises millions of jobs worldwide, and particularly puts at risk the very vulnerable people, like I said, at the bottom of the supply chain, so the factory workers that are now not getting paid for orders that brands have pulled out from. So it's such a complex, intertwined system, but it also hinders access to a fundamental part of our identity, our self-expression. And yet a recent survey found that 45% of respondents learned during COVID-19 that they need less stuff in order to be happy. It's nearly half of people. So now you know a little bit more about me and my journey which led me to launching the Circular New project. Let's take a further look into what circularity has to do with fashion. According to Dr. Anna Brismar, founder of Green Strategy and owner of CircularFashion.com, circular fashion specifically is described as being designed, sourced, produced and provided with the intention to be used and circulate responsibly and effectively in society for as long as possible in their most valuable form, and hereafter return safely to the biosphere when no longer of human use. Sentence and a half. Circular pioneers typically engage in 5 essential areas of intervention: design for longevity, design for reduced impacts, design for recycling, end-of-life systems and alternative business models. However, the field is open to innovations from any person or company that wants to extend the lifespan of clothing through quality design, mindset change and repair services. But again, this raises the issue of how brands can communicate these initiatives to us as consumers, and what we can do to support them or play an active role in circularity. I joined a webinar with Fashion for Good just a couple of weeks ago where such questions were actually raised.
And that's interesting. We have a question on how do you communicate or educate the consumers the impact of the role of circular economy that these models have. So I think you just touched on that, but is there anything else that you'd like to add, given that that was also a question?
Sure. But this is part of sort of like the new relationship that you can build with customers. To date, what sort of newsletter do you send to your customers apart from we've got a new collection, or we're doing this pop-up, or we're doing that event? Here you can really create a fantastic storytelling around we've been reselling how many items this year, and this is the environmental footprint that we've had thanks to this. I think of the exact valuation of the reduction of CO2 emission and resources used, etc., will be quite difficult to quantify, but you can get a ballpark number and you can build a really interesting message around such initiatives. And one of the challenges of retailers, and I think even more so in the current context, is to bring customers from offline to online and build an online activity. With these new services, creating a new experience online is something extremely valuable.
These are things I'm hoping to directly address with the Circular New project. I'm hoping it will be that bridge between information and action. Now, fashion itself is not an isolated entity. It's a running commentary of societal feelings, emotions, movements, values and belief. It's affected by and affects social, economic, cultural and external factors, as well as internalised beliefs about ourselves and about our understanding of other people. Fashion is a direct reflection of the zeitgeist, the defining spirit or mood of a particular period of history as shown by the ideas and beliefs of the time. And especially when we take into consideration the unpredictable and I would say revolutionary nature of 2020 so far, the importance of relatability and intersectionality becomes self-evident. In light of recent events, a global pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, there's a lot of very important conversation happening right now. And in that sense, I want to be transparent and say that with so much to talk about, it's not just a case of where do I possibly begin, but how can I say everything that I want to say or needs to be said. And the truth is, I can't. We can't have all these conversations in one go, but I'm hoping by breaking it up into chunks across the next few weeks, this will be a very good place to start. In my advocating for circular fashion, I still have a lot of learning to do. I have a lot to understanding oppression and self-unlearning of whiteness, white supremacy and white privilege, and to understanding how that can affect or distort my understanding of circular solutions. But a marathon begins with a single step, and I'm going to do my very best to make sure I'm amplifying Black, people of colour and Indigenous voices within circular conversations. I'm dedicating a whole episode to intersectionality in a couple of weeks' time, as it's fundamentally interwoven into the fashion industry and all relevant external things that affect the fashion industry. Now, when it comes to my work, I am a self-proclaimed perfectionist. I like to proofread things over and over and spend ages finessing and make sure it's perfect before I release anything out into the world. So there is a raw vulnerability to doing a Digi-Diary vlog series because it forces me to document my knowledge shortcomings in a very transparent way. But that's when I saw, rather coincidentally, this quite fitting quote on Instagram by Elsie and Fred. So it's called "Perfectionism is the poison to activism." This is so important. Don't get so clouded in your own anger and frustration that you forget to see the bigger picture. Not everyone is going to get their message 100% right. Not everyone is thinking about the exact same thing you are at the exact same time. These thoughts come after a lot of frustration with people's silence regarding Black people being killed by police. We must make sure our own energy is high before we can give it out, or we will run out of steam. But don't drag others down or call people out for not having their tonality right if they have the right idea. Educate them. We have a tendency as humans to want to gain leverage when we know more than someone else about a certain thing, but try to empower the person next to you who's trying to learn. Keep focus and remember who you're playing against, not with. So I thought that was quite fitting and just acknowledging that everybody's at a different point in their understanding of the world at the moment, but within the topics that they feel strongly for. And I understand not everybody is interested in learning about the fashion industry or interested in changing the fashion system or their role within that, and that's absolutely fine. No one's here to make you. I'm simply here to share information, hopefully inspire a bit, and enlighten to some of the things that the fashion industry could be in the future. Now more than ever, I appreciate that fashion is something that we aspire to be a part of. And if we are going to continue with these aspirations, especially in a post-coronavirus and strives towards an anti-racist society, then we must be more mindful, more considerate and actively advocate for changes which make fashion safer, more sustainable, stable, inclusive and fair for everyone involved. Without causing anyone to feel too overwhelmed, I'm hoping that through Circular and You we can enhance each other's understandings of fashion, fashion industry, consumerism and individual digital activism, and hopefully just take a step closer towards achieving that ideal circular fashion economy. So my next Digi-Diary will be out in a couple of weeks. I'll tag my Instagram and my website linked down below if you would like to check those out, because I will be posting updates about the Circular New project there. Because when it comes to circular fashion, you've got to be there or be square. Sorry, had to be done, it had to be said. Thank you so much for watching, and I will speak to you all very soon.